Awesome. Hi, Kaylee. How are
Hello,
you?
I'm so good. How are you?
Good. I am so excited to be doing this. This is our official second Living and Learning webinar. And it's honestly just been a joy and a thrill to just walk through different professional development opportunities for our faculty and staff at different universities. And so happy to have you on the call with us.
You. I'm
So,
so
for
excited.
everyone who is joining in on our call today, we are highlighting how to leverage technology to increase global engagement. And I think, wow, what a more perfect topic in this COVID era that we are living in right now. Um, I think a lot of us were fingers crossed in the spring, hoping that it wouldn't have dragged this far into the fall, but here we are. And I think it's so important that we are tackling topics like this and just continuing to press forward and challenge ourselves even. So hopefully this is a webinar that will do that to really help us to continue to pivot, but hopefully do it a little excitingly. So Kaylee, thank you so much for joining us. I would love for everyone to hear just a little bit more about you, and then I'll introduce myself afterwards. But tell us about you, Kaylee Hillebrand. I know you work at Vanguard, but tell everyone what your role looks like there at the university.
Yeah, I'm the Associate Dean of International and Experiential Education at Vanguard. And so my job, I think like most of us who work in higher ed, we have multiple hats. And so I oversee our study abroad, all of our volunteer, whether it's local or global. I also oversee our scholars program, undeclared students, international students, kind of the whole gamut of all the ways that our students can do the experiential education components kind of filter through my office. And so, another thing to know about me is I'm currently working on my doctorate degree through George Fox University on leadership and global perspectives. So, this topic is actually very much in alignment with what I will be working on for the next several years. So happy to be here.
I love that. Wow. Well, Kaylee, you do not have a small job at all. Sounds like you are wearing a ton of hats with what you're doing at the university and your doctoral work and a now mother. Just
Mhm.
so many exciting things happening. I love that. So I don't think I even introduced myself. My name is Rachel Roskoski. I work as the Director of Study Tours with Living and Learning International. And in my role, I really oversee all of our short-term programming. And typically what that looks like is working directly with faculty, creating customized programs, and really helping them to take the class outside of the classroom and beyond what I call the four walls, which is so thrilling. I love it. I think as much as I love study abroad as a whole, there's a special place in my heart for just empowering faculty and staff and helping them to really just dream about how study abroad can be a reality for them. So it's been so much fun just being a part of Living and Learning and doing that and working alongside Kaylee for I think over 6 years now. We've known
Mhm.
each other for quite a while, which is so exciting. So, as we kind of find ourselves now at this point and thinking about how COVID has really altered and shifted so much, I don't think we could even in this hour sit down and talk about how much it's changed everything. But I know for me, at least, with living and learning and typically planning short term programs for faculty, COVID impacted everything. Like, I'll never forget in the spring when COVID officially hit. I think I had like 6 study tours cancel on me within 4 or 5 days. And I joke about it now because it felt like a breakup after one, after another, after another, because you feel so emotionally invested in these programs that you're putting together.
Yeah.
And of course, COVID is not anything personal, it's happened to everyone worldwide, but really created a need to pivot and to shift and to think through how can we still create meaningful opportunities for students, even if they're not getting on an airplane. And I think that has changed so much of our thinking and our planning and even our dreaming within the next year. So I know for me, I've thought more domestically. My original hope and goal was, all right, let's get everybody out of here and let's go somewhere else. But now it's created just a deeper desire to even think through how can we explore the US and create domestic opportunities for students so they can still have a meaningful experience even though they're not maybe going international. So it has definitely been quite a year, but I think most of us have a smile on our face and we're feeling excited about what's happening, even though it looks different than we anticipated. So, Kayli, what has it looked like for you at Vanguard? Have you felt have you felt the impacts of COVID-19?
Oh, how I wish I could say we haven't, but we have significantly. And, in my role, we canceled just under a dozen trips for us this last year. And then moving forward into this academic year, we have suspended all travel as well. So it's definitely created a void, but also an opportunity for us. And so I've been desiring to kind of push into more of these virtual based opportunities as really a means of equity and
Mhm.
inclusion for our student population. And so this is almost like forced us. So in a really neat way, our university's kind of been forced to really engage in the online component in a way that they probably never would have had we not been forced by COVID to really step into this. So
Well, that's so true. I think a lot of the changes that we've seen were inevitable and they were coming in the pipeline, but we've just kind of been thrust
yep,
forward into all of this change, whether we were ready or not, right?
absolutely, absolutely.
Wow. Well, I am excited to dive deep into this topic with you,
Oh,
Kaylee. I think, um, wow, pivoting and thinking through how are we still, making global engagement a reality for students, a reality really is so important. And we're going to dive into that today. So I'm
yeah,
going to go ahead and share our screen.
perfect.
And that way we can just kind of talk about all things virtual.
Yeah, I love it.
Get us from the beginning. Sorry, everyone's getting a preview. All right, here we
Sneak
go.
peek. Yeah. So one of the things that I've heard a lot is, oh, do you just not have anything to do now because of COVID? And I was like, oh Lord, my job has grown exponentially. And I think one of the things that we just realized, and I think those of us in this role, right, we just know global learning does not go away just because we're unable to mobilize. And so we're definitely presented with an additional challenge of how do you mobilize students when you can't physically mobilize them. And so one of the things that we really pressed into is really just this idea of these virtual opportunities. And so when we look at the research, the experience in other countries or this cross-cultural communication really makes us more flexible, more creative, and really complex thinkers, which I think all of us can say that that is what our university really aims to build in our student population. So what we've seen during the COVID era and this pandemic is, we're seeing all these like racial injustice protests or the anti-lockdown protests, not just in the US, but in a global context. Some of us may not be aware, but there is significant farm reform in India, and they've had a massive protest. And so while you're still seeing people congregate in the streets, what we've also seen is just a mass shift to their virtual environment of really advocacy and engagement. So we saw Blackout Tuesday earlier this year. We saw the Save the Children campaign and so many others. And so even in the middle of this pandemic, we're watching how society's pivoting based on what's happening, and so when we can't congregate in person, we have to find these alternative options. So one of the things that I have found super interesting is the CCCU launched a study last year that revealed that 58% of Gen Z claim that they would be identified as a Christian, and yet only 9% of those would say that they're actually engaged in their faith. And so one of the things that has kind of made me think is, okay, so if I'm getting such a low number of students coming to my institution that are engaging in their faith, then how do I make it applicable to them where they're at?
Yeah.
And where are they? They're in the classroom. And so, really, when I look at kind of these project based internationalization or these virtual opportunities that we can kind of really connect with our students in the classroom, I really look at as a means to help students engage with their faith in a lens that they never thought that they would ever put on, And so the AAC&U, which is the American Association of Colleges and Universities, is really kind of a staple. A lot of us who've done any sort of our accreditation or assessments use their rubrics a lot. And so if we look at that value rubric that they have for global learning, we'll kind of see three things that they really identify that students should be able to do. So the first one is become informed, open-minded, and responsible people who are attentive to diversity across the spectrum of differences. The second is that they seek to understand how their actions affect both the local and global communities, and that's a big one. And then third is that they address the world's most pressing and enduring issues collaboratively and equitably. And so really basing that using that rubric has been a massive staple for us as we build these programs moving forward. So Rachel will kind of launch into those global competencies that we have a little bit later, but really what we strive for is that we need to consider that these programs are going to be developmental. They need to be really transformative, not just transactional. So whereas maybe in a traditional study setting, it's more of just a give and I'm going to give to the student and that's it, but really they need to be transformational. They're going to take time. This is not a fast process by any means, and then with that we also need to set up an environment that's conducive for their learning. So that would be really like a safe and supportive environment, because some students have maybe never interacted with a culture different to their own. So some of the common ways that we see some of these global engagement activities that can take place at home are listed right here. One of the ones that we'll press into is really this global virtual internship. Vanguard's utilized that a lot with Living and Learning, and we're so grateful that they were already ahead of the curve and had these ready to go. But some of these other ones, right? Project-based internationalization down at the bottom is probably the other one I want to hit, is really this idea of how can you take an assignment that a student has. So say they're a business major and they have an assignment of developing a business plan. So rather than just having that theoretical business plan where they make up a business, you would actually connect them with a relationship that you may already have. So for us, we use a lot of our missionary partners. And so there's a huge need and lack of education with a partner specifically in Tanzania. And so our students are actually partnered with people, real life, real time, that have a real need, that are entrepreneurs, that are not going to go to business school, are trying to do just, these really small businesses. And so our students are connecting with them to develop business plans for them. So they're meeting them in real time and they're meeting a real need. And so we're seeing that is that transformational education where students are seeing there's something at stake here, and these are real people. And my education right now can be utilized to meet real needs around the globe. And I don't just have to wait until I have this really expensive piece of paper at the end of my time in college, And so if you have no clue where to start, maybe for us, when we first were doing this, we're like, what in the world? A really great resource is the UN has Sustainable Development Goals, really that are there to guide global learning for impact. So there's 17 of them. They've been around for several years, but these are global common good, and so if you're trying to figure out, okay, what could I do? Look at some of these goals and see, hey, where do I naturally kind of fit? So we'll kind of dive in more into at the end, kind of how we do this, the nitty and the gritty, but really thinking about the larger the goal for the global engagement, a lot of times there's more funding there too. So just a little tidbit for you. So students, when we look at them entering the workforce, it's virtual, right? So I have been at my office a total of 5 times in the last 11 months. And so part of that is I also had a baby at the very beginning of this year. But the reality is I'm completely virtual. And my office will probably be one of the last offices to return on campus, just due to the fact that it's not really a necessity that we're performing any sort of my office doesn't need to be meet in person right now. And so we've been able to pivot, which has been great, but really this kind of global environment and this virtual environment that these students are in engaging right now, although not ideal for any of us, is really preparing them for the workforce that they're going to be entering in. And so I know Rachel and I can both kind of attest to, there's so many organizations out there that probably are not going to go back into physical buildings, or will probably dramatically reduce their policies for staff and whatnot. And so these students right now are being trained in the classroom for how to function in a virtual world. When we look at kind of some of the research again, the 5 kind of areas that employers would say students are not prepared for are problem solving in diverse groups, scientific literacy, knowledge of global developments, knowledge of cultures and societies outside of the USA, and then foreign language proficiency. And so when we talk about wanting to develop these programs and use technology for that, we're already hearing from employers that these are exactly the areas that students are not proficient in when they come out and enter the workforce. So we're already kind of meeting a need that our students have and that future employers have. So when we look at this study, I found super interesting. This again was put out by the AACU with Hart Research Associates, but 400 executives from private sector and nonprofit organizations reported that 70% of their organizations are globally connected. So right off the bat, students are going to enter a workforce that has a global connection. 96% of them believe that all students that are entering the workforce should have experiences solving problems with other people whose views are different from their own. And if we are not seeing this play out in real time, I can never think of a time that that this is showing right now. If you don't agree with someone right now, right, it's a very interesting time to watch our world. 78% of them stated that regardless of a student's field of study, so it doesn't matter their academic discipline, that all students should gain intercultural skills and an understanding of societies and countries outside of the US. And then lastly, 80% said it was very important for recent graduates to demonstrate their ability to apply learning in real world settings. So again, this just kind of reinforces that this global workforce can be so much more well equipped and prepared if we're engaging at it with our students while they're in the undergraduate degree or even graduate degree, but traditionally in this undergraduate environment. How much better of an employee would they be, and that we would be developing and cultivating by utilizing these platforms. So lastly, on the work side, really is 92% of employers are looking for personality traits, right? So not necessarily even the skills, but the traits that are enhanced by study abroad or training abroad. So you can see them there: tolerance, confidence, problem solving, curiosity, and then knowing one's strengths and weaknesses and decisiveness. So for us at Vanguard, it's really important to, from the get-go, as freshmen come in, they have a course called Cornerstone, which is like the introduction to Vanguard. And from that very first class that they have, they're creating a resume, and then they're also engaging in some sort of means of volunteer or kind of putting their education already into practice and identifying how their education can meet a real need in the world. And so our goal is that from the very first semester to their very last semester, we're helping just connect those dots so that not at the end of 3 or 4 years, they're like, oh gosh, I have no clue what I learned. But throughout the whole process, they're updating their resume, they're getting, verbiage from our career services office on how do you put these transferable skills on your resume or in LinkedIn. and really kind of making it comprehensive for them so that when they walk into a job interview or a grad school interview, they will already be prepared for knowing how to articulate what they learned and
Mhm.
how that could apply and be an asset to, the given organization or the school or whatever they're going after. So um, really we're trying to create kind of in everything that we do this bridge of here and there. So I think it's easy for some people to see certain topics and think, oh, that's just something that they encounter in a third world country, and
Right.
not realizing that the US has our own set of problems too. And so there's certain things that really are here as well as there, and so that's what we kind of drive through. I'll talk more about that a little bit later. um, but Rachel, maybe you could kind of dive into those competencies a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. And Kaylee, I think it's so good on what you were sharing because I think in the past, it probably felt so easy for students to, like you said, create a hypothetical business or a maybe. But through these opportunities where students are working with real companies and real countries and real businesses, it feels like more is on the line and hopefully creates more buy-in. And then
Exactly.
in the end, actually prepares them better for the workforce. And I think at this point we can all sit back and say, all right, we know global engagement is important. And we know that we're becoming a smaller world as technology increases. It's easier to access people everywhere in just a click of a button. I laugh and say by the end of COVID, everyone should be Zoom certified and we should get that little LinkedIn badge because of how much we've been doing this. But, it's so much more than just that. And as we are diving through COVID, and I think at this point we're maybe at month 10, um, maybe who knows how long this will even last. Um, so I think we have now found a lot of these like, checkpoints where we know, okay, we have learned this, and COVID has taught us this about education and this about conflict resolution and relationships. And yet there's so much that we're still diving into. So when it comes down to like data of why global engagement really is important and how to do it through technology, I would say that that data is constantly evolving and changing and hopefully being presented more out there. We'll circle back to you when you're done with that doctorate, Kaylee.
Yeah.
But for now, we can turn to a few of these resources and things that we have found. And one of them, I always talk about this, is the NACE competencies. The National Association of Colleges and Employers has found that these are 8 key items that are critical for students to know when they're graduating and to be competent in these. But I would dare to even say that probably one of my favorites right now, and probably one that we should be focusing on a lot through this pandemic, is global and intercultural fluency. How are we making that a priority for students when they're not getting on an airplane? And I think hopefully COVID has taught us that we are naive to think that global and intercultural fluency can only happen if it's on an airplane. It's so much bigger than that. It's through everything else on campus. And we're going to dive into that soon. But I love NACE. I love that they've made it clear for us to see these are the 8 things that students need. But right now, in a world where we can't travel, and or maybe we shouldn't be if we are, what does this look like? Global and intercultural fluency, and how do we help students, to work with people that are different than them? And I know we've highlighted on this already, but entering the remote workforce, my goodness. I'll be honest, I'm grateful that I was already working remote before this because I think it would have been a huge shock for me. I was already prepared for figuring out the work from home balance, but students are entering into this. And it's not just, hey, your spring semester has been altered and, well, your summer internship wasn't face to face anymore. And, well, hey, sorry, fall looks a little different too. Oh, by the way, when you graduate, you're entering a remote job. Um, and that's just the reality of it. So, what can we look at right now? We have found from Stanford that 42% of full-time US workforce is entirely virtual. That means that almost half of our workforce is working from home. And we're really having to juggle all of that. It's even estimated from the Global Workplace Analytics that 25 to 30% of the workforce will be working from home multiple days a week by the end of 2021. We've all heard this. We've heard that a lot of big companies in Silicon Valley are thinking about doing this hybrid work from home, also working in the office. A lot of the big three there in Michigan, whether you work for GM, Ford, and Chrysler, a lot of them are saying, hey, you're working from home until at least summer 2021. So students are entering into a very remote world, yet a world that is what feels like expanding and becoming more closely connected. So it really just kind of alters what students can expect. But in addition to that, our study abroad offices are emptying. I think that's maybe another big shift in all of this, is that as COVID has loomed over our situation even longer, maybe a lot of our institutions that were already struggling financially have cut maybe their study abroad programming. Maybe some individuals have been furloughed or laid off. And that's not just study abroad offices, but faculty even that were key significant players at their universities pushing forward study abroad engagement. So if there wasn't already a gap in study abroad within Christian higher ed, that void is even bigger now. So we should all be sitting down thinking, how do we help our students? How do we make sure that they know that global engagement is still important, whether their study abroad office is empty, or maybe there's no international mission trips right now, or I mean, anything else. Maybe there's less international students on their campus. How do we make sure that they know that this is still important and that we, through our programming, want that to still be a key focal point in the education experience that they're getting? So, Kayli, you're on a campus. Why
Yeah.
don't you tell us a little bit about what you guys are doing and how you're still making sure that students know, hey, we haven't forgotten about this global intercultural fluency that you need. We're going to make it a priority even through COVID.
Absolutely. So if you're like Vanguard, you have some sort of emphasis week, or maybe I know Rachel in your previous job, you had a launch week
Mhm.
for your study abroad programs. And so we entered this season kind of not knowing if that was going to need to be in a virtual format or not. And I actually made the call for my team pretty early on in the semester. And it may have been even before school started that we were going to transition the whole thing into a virtual format, because I really wanted to invest time and energy into creating virtual opportunities that were really quality, rather than feeling like we're going to have to adjust and just throw something online at the last minute. So we did. So we have a Geo Week, and it's a campus wide event. And this year we did it. It was 100% virtual. But it actually opened up some new like creative channels that we probably never would have thought about had we just been in person. So for example, the start of the week, I always bring a camel on campus, and
I
students can
love
ride
that.
it and take pictures, and it's so fun, and it's really a highlight. Obviously, Nadia the camel could not come this year, so hopefully we'll have her again. But even those like really fun interactive things, obviously I always give away lots of food and things, and that couldn't happen either. And so what we did is our students, my intern team really kind of took the lead, and one of the things they said was, no, would be so fun is to do like cultural cooking classes.
Mm.
And honestly, it was one that I was like, okay, cool. Like, I don't think that's going to go well, but I'm just going to let you run with it. And honestly, to my surprise, like it was phenomenal. So they did these pre-recorded videos. Some of them had their family members in it, and others did it just themselves. But were really able to showcase a dish that was really important to them culturally and with their family. And so like our videos are averaging like 400 or 500 views, which is just insane to me. And one of our gals did a arroz con leche with her grandma, and that has over 800 views. Like that's almost 50% of our undergraduate population has
Wow.
viewed that. And so things where maybe we would have gotten like 200 to 300 students engaged, we're now seeing that number just jump, you know. And so you can't kind of limit yourself, you know, into what these things can do. So another thing that we did was chapels, we always would have speakers come that generally were missionaries or study abroad folk that would come in and speak. And so because that couldn't happen, we actually asked our partners to film a full video in their cultural context. So we had one from our partner in Northern Ireland and one from a partner in Tanzania. And so they did the whole thing. They welcomed our students, they did worship, and then gave a message directly from there. They also were able to show through video like some of the ways that they engage and how our students traditionally engage with them in person. So it was really actually pretty cool because it was an opportunity for students to see something that they wouldn't see if our partner just came and showed up in our chapel and spoke for 30 minutes. And so
That's,
using a lot of those fun things, Instagram Live has been our lifesaver.
yeah.
And so it's been really, really fun to kind of see what we're doing. So another thing that we're really pressing into is really looking at these project-based internships and really the deliverables with them. So there's a few kind of topics on the board that we were on the PowerPoint, like at the board, as if we're like into class. But really looking at these here and there examples that I kind of alluded to earlier. And so one of those for us is really the refugee crisis. So some of our study abroad programs really touch on, we go to Greece a lot, and we go to, Romania and different areas that really are heavily impacted by the refugee crisis. But what we try and do is actually take that back to Costa Mesa, back to Southern California, and say, hey, there's actually over 20,000 refugees right here that are our neighbors. And so literally 15 minutes away from our campus, we have a partner that welcomes and helps really our refugees that are entering Orange County adjust to life here. And that could be language acquisition, that can be job skills, like just a whole variety of things. And so we're always taking those opportunities of, hey, so maybe we're not sending you to Greece right now, but isn't it cool that we can have our partner in Greece that deals with the refugee crisis? And we can have our partner here at home that deals with the refugee crisis, and we can probably actually pair those and learn from one another and kind of dive into that and a little bit more. And so another one really that we have kind of just latched onto is really the project-based and like the global virtual internship that we did with Living and Learning. And so I was super excited when Rachel said, hey, we have this opportunity. What do you think? And we said, heck yes, let's do it. And so Rachel, you want to tell us a little bit about that whole program?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the values in, technology is that one, those cooking classes that Kaylee talked about are still up online.
Hmm.
So if anyone's wanting to make arroz con leche, that is available for you guys after this webinar.
Yeah.
But, not just tapping into what's already on campus, but program providers like Living and Learning. I think
Hmm.
there are so many things that you can do on campus. And then there are others that simply you're like, how do I do this? Who is doing it already? And how can I work with them? And I think that has been one of my favorite things throughout really just this COVID season is the beautiful and organic collaborations that have really evolved through all of this. So I want to give a great example. This spring, we were supposed to actually host, Messiah College was sending down a political science group to Ecuador, and they were going to be learning about just so many different key topics. And COVID officially kind of closed our borders in Ecuador, I think 5 days before the team was going to come down. So, of course, we had to cancel the program. We were devastated, but the professor and I sat down and thought, how can we still make this work? How can we create something meaningful? So, kind of what felt a little bit like a virtual study abroad or elements of it, we created what's called a global lecture series. And over the course of that week that they were supposed to be in Ecuador, we had our partners in Ecuador actually video in and join the students' virtual class. And we covered key political issues such as the dollarization of Ecuador and switching from what was their currency to the US dollar and what did that look like. and talking about the Venezuelan refugee crisis there in Ecuador, one of our key partners that is doing a lot of work with that people group. And then even some of our indigenous people groups. And what are some partners doing to help those that are, in the jungle? So that was a remarkable experience that even though the students weren't able to join us, they were learning in live time from partners, and it created a totally different experience. At the end of it, the professor shared with me just the student evaluations. And, I was maybe half sobbing in my work from home office, just thinking, these students were impacted so greatly by what we thought was our plan B option. And yet for them, it was something that was so meaningful. And I think, like Kayli was saying, there's intentionality that creates just a program that is totally different and really could be life riveting for these students. It's so new and fresh and a deeper perspective. So that's our global lecture series. And then Living and Learning has also launched our global virtual internship. It kicked off this past summer and has continued through our fall and spring. And like Kayli even said, it has helped us to realize we can reach a totally different student population even after COVID is over. This is something that can stay as a key program that we offer. So through our global virtual internship, a no-brainer, it is virtual. Students are not flying. They are doing it from the comfort of their home or their local Starbucks or wherever they have a strong Wi-Fi connection. But during their program, they are partnered with a real-time company or a real business or a real organization somewhere abroad. It's, of course, career related. So whatever their major is, it's something that's going to help them out in their future goals. They are partnered with a mentor. I actually got to mentor a few students this summer, loved it. It was a highlight of my week, every week that I got to meet with them. And then they also were in a community development course, helping to connect those dots. How is what they're doing in their actual internship impacting a real community? And again, this isn't just fake business plans and like hypothetical scenarios of what would happen if you ran the business this way. You're working with real people. So there's so much more on the line. And, if they don't get that assignment done, it's not just a past due assignment grade. It's, your supervisor is counting on that for XYZ. So it has just been so rewarding and incredibly just, I've been personally astounded by the amount of impact that students have felt through a virtual internship. And I love it that you don't have to get on an airplane to have a really meaningful experience. So we actually have a special guest speaker with us. Her name is Leonka Bauer, and she is a great friend. Leonka and I actually spent a lot of our summer together. Sadly, only virtually. We are planning to eventually, meet in person and hang out. But Leonka is, of course, a Vanguard student. So she knows Kayli, she knows myself. And Leonka, you were just such a joy to work with this summer. You are a graduating senior, you're a sociology major. And I think, at least for me personally, as your mentor through this experience, it was just honestly an honor to see you grow and blossom through what really felt like a real life work experience. So why don't you go ahead, tell us a little bit about you and who you
Okay.
worked with and what those responsibilities within your internship, what did those look like?
Okay. Well, I want to say, first of all, thank you for asking me to do this. There's so much that you guys have already touched on and spoken about that perfectly described my internship experience that I could just talk about all day. But I internshipped with iPoor Life Ethiopia. They have programs all over, including in the US with the foster youth. But my job was to target a new population, especially the population between 18 to 25 years old. So right in my age group. Within a sub township outside of the capital of Ethiopia, that is just a discarded people group that has been completely isolated and just basically ignored and forgotten. And so how do we engage this population and provide employment opportunities, provide educational opportunities? So my responsibility was to study from the beginning the history of the country, the history of the program, what they've already done, what they were planning to do, their successes, their failures, and then learn from that, study their business model, everything, and then design a whole new program from scratch, the implementation of it, the evaluation of it, kind of, providing plan Bs of like, what if this doesn't work out? How do we transition into a new type of engagement? Everything, and then getting to pitch this idea to the entire iPoor Life leadership team. And so that was really like a real work-life experience, and having a mentor walk you through it, and having a supervisor check in, tracking your progress, and you need to provide results each week and kind of, say this is what I've done and this is what I plan to do. So you really do have a real responsibility and an impact. So that was a great experience to get that even before graduating.
Wow. So I like to think of that as a no joke internship.
Yeah.
Not just twiddling your thumbs this summer, you were really getting hands-on experience. That is incredible. I love that. So Lianka, when you look back on your time, could you say that you felt that it was actually making a real impact, that you were really investing into an actual community and making a difference?
Right. I mean, that's obviously a legitimate fear with a virtual experience of like, I don't really get to interact with this, people group in this community directly. So how am I going to really know what my impact is? But the impact was still there, not just on me personally and working with an internship team member and trying to, build off of each other's ideas, but also your impact is more so on the organization themselves, because it is a virtual experience, you try so much harder because you want them to take your ideas even more seriously, and you want them to really want to consider, what you're pitching to them, and really back it up with real facts and past studies and past organizations that have done similar things and build on that. So I feel like more responsibility and more pressure because it is virtual, because you want to have more of an impact. You kind of you have to compensate for not being able to interact with the community directly.
Wow. Wow, that's incredible. So even in a virtual setting, I know this is maybe a big question people have is, okay, that cross-cultural dynamic, how are we figuring that out? Did you feel exposed to another culture, even virtually? And do you feel even more knowledgeable now of that culture because of your internship?
Yeah, I mean, I could do a whole presentation on Ethiopia and their past and, religion and politics and their current political movements, everything. You have to dive really deep. And Evan, our supervisor, he provided kind of like bullet points each week. You spend the first couple of weeks kind of just building your knowledge on it first before diving into the program development part of it, just to kind of gain some background knowledge. And each week he provided bullet points of like, you need to get to know this aspect of the culture and this aspect of the nation and this aspect of the program, and then, give feedback each week and reiterate it. So you really dive really, really deep into it, real research, journal studies, data, everything. And then also working with Jaya, which is an on-site implementation staff member in Ethiopia. And he locally lives there, and he's involved in the culture and in the community. So we get to ask him questions of, this is an idea I have, but I'm not sure, it's an American idea. So how do I make sure that that culturally translates correctly and that it has the impact that I'm hoping it will have? How are you interpreting the idea that I'm giving you? So you still get to know that. You get to know the current existing partners that they have and the organizations they're working with. You have to understand how the government is going to support your program, because you can't design a program that they're not going to allow, or that's going to be problematic in any way. So you have to be culturally competent in that way in order to provide something that actually is going to be possible.
Wow, I love that. And I think Lianka, while operating as your mentor through the summer and just kind of tracking along with your progress, I was always impressed by how intentional you were with considering the cultural dynamics. But I think even after this experience, you were so much more open to how that impacts the work, what's being accepted, and how can it later be implemented. So I think that is so important, that with a virtual internship, students are recognizing that their advisors are making that just something that they're continuously bringing up, because we can't think that just because there's a screen and we're losing so many other elements of what we're talking about, and those dynamics still there. So wow.
Definitely.
Well, Leonka, how would you say, you're graduating this December, and congratulations
Yeah.
on the month of school. How would you say that an internship like this prepared you for your future career and really your goals that you have post-graduation?
I think besides the obvious virtual aspect of it, like you guys talked through the presentation about how the world is shifting towards a virtual platform, besides that, the NACE competencies and the value rubric and everything from the very beginning of our group meetings in the internship, it was like, these are the competencies that you need to meet and be able to reflect on. And then each week checking in with you as a mentor, you asked us critical questions about how can you this week make sure you focus on something that you feel like you might be lacking in. You might be stronger fit in one competency, but where can you expand and build on that you feel like you're not as equipped with yet. So it was very intentional on living and learning's part, and as advisors checking in each week, making sure to ask those questions. Spiritual formation was also a huge part of it. And how can you back this up with your faith? How can you back this up with your education? And what are you actually going to do with this knowledge? It's like, okay, I know this, but so what? Like, what do I do with that information? And so asking those critical questions each week to not just be like, oh, I'm feeding you information, you're able to repeat it, but how do you interpret it yourself?
Yeah. Wow. I love that. Well, it sounds like you really just gained so much through that experience. And I am so confidently saying that iPour Life was blown away by the work that you did and just how much you invested deeply. It was only 6 weeks, but
Yeah.
put together materials and presentations and pitches that they are using like in big meetings, like even here in DC where I live, they're taking the material that you put together and using that. So I love it.
Yeah.
It's something you can proudly put on your resume, and it will sparkle and shine and really show off all those competencies that you said you learned. So
Yeah, and I think the information, the experience, I keep processing. I haven't stopped processing what I've learned. And in new internships, I actually am a volunteer with the refugee population and organization in Orange County virtually. So I've been able to translate that experience into a different virtual experience, also, virtually interning with a foster care agency. So it doesn't stop, and you're able to continue that growth.
wow, that's remarkable. Well, Leonka, thank you so much. We are so excited for you and the journey that you're on and graduating soon. And thank you so much for just hopping on and sharing your experience with us.
Thank you for having me.
Anytime. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye. Awesome. Well, I always love hearing from Leonka. I like to think of her as our official global virtual internship spokeswoman.
Absolutely.
She is just so eloquent and just great at everything she does. So that was wonderful. Just hearing from a real student and a real experience. And we can tell that it's something that she has carried on through even the fall semester and is continuously debriefing on her own about what that really meant. So I think a lot of us now are kind of sitting thinking, okay, we know global engagement is important. We know there are opportunities in how we can make this happen, but how do we kind of just bring this back down to a few practical steps and some next action items for us to think through? How do I make this a reality on my campus and for my students? So Kayli, again,
Yeah.
you're on a real campus. So
Yeah.
why don't you tell us a little bit about what this looks like for you guys and some real actionable how-tos?
Absolutely. And I think Leonka kind of just embodies what I try and help students realize is, hey, you sitting in a seat, even if it's at home, right? But you sitting in a class right now shows that you have more education than the vast majority of this world right now. And so that education can be utilized
Mhm.
today and not just later on. She just embodies that so well. So I just love her. But four kind of questions that we go through and ask on our campus is what problems can be solved that are related to our specific areas of academic study. And so not every campus is going to have academic departments that are the same. And so what are your unique kind of areas that really are already kind of in this realm? What classes already incorporate service or experiential learning? We've gone through every single one of our syllabi on our campus to figure out who those are
Mhm.
and which classes we can kind of maybe more easily engage in this on the front lines. What classes or programs require research? This is a really good one too that I think we often forget of. Students can still learn how to do really good research, even if they're doing it for a global context that's not in their immediate area. So tapping into those courses and programs. And then which majors and minors require an internship or practicum? So going after sociology was my major. I think it's best. But they do require internships and practicums of their students. And so already partnering with those departments that have that requirement is a great way. And this year with COVID, they were coming to us saying, hey, do you have opportunities that our students can? Because for like Leonka,
Mhm.
she had to have that requirement met for graduation,
Yeah.
and not being able to put her in an in-person opportunity, we had to pivot and do that. So the other thing is to just look at the assets and relationships your university already has. So there's a list here for you, but looking at, and sorry for my little peanut gallery if you can hear him, this is working virtually, friends, with a 10-month-old.
We
Uh,
love that, actually.
I know he's just ready. He's ready to go engage the world.
Yeah.
But really look at what your university already has. So for us, career services is a fantastic office. So we partner with them a lot and really intentionally looking at our faculty and their areas of expertise, different grant opportunities that might come up. And so how can we kind of already be prepared? So if our grants office comes and says, hey, there's some funding potential, do you have anything in mind? We already have 15 ideas that we're ready to rock and roll with, and kind of partnerships that we've already developed that say, hey, would you be on board to do this? Alumni, another really great one. So, but the office is on campus. So for my office, we kind of encompass pretty much all of that last section. But for other universities, you might have your missions or your outreach office, and you might have study abroad, and you might have international students. So how do you leverage them? So for Vanguard, with study abroad, we have the GEO office, and we already know that we have resources and partnerships such as Living and Learning that are already seeking out these modes of teaching and learning. So we're not going to recreate the wheel here. And so that was the best thing for us, is to say, hey, we have Living and Learning as a resource. They have these opportunities available. So it was a no-brainer for us to say, hey, we just gotta kind of marry the two, and then you get things like Leonka and having these great opportunities. So Rachel, if you just kind of want to talk about the opportunities that Living and Learning has, I will always vouch for Living and Learning in these great programs that you guys have.
Well, and we appreciate that so much. Yeah, I think, it's great to collaborate with resources already on campus, like you're saying. I know prior to my role with Southeastern, or prior to Living and Learning, I worked at Southeastern, and that was one of my favorite things, was thinking through how can I collaborate with people already on my campus, because a lot of times everyone is trying to work towards the same goals, but by collaborating, you're able to work towards those faster and more efficiently, and just in a more holistic manner that really helps the students. But like we said, sometimes there are some things that are just easier partnering with someone outside of the university. Sitting down and not only creating internship opportunities for students, but then adding a course and then having a dedicated mentor, that's a lot of work. And that's something that Living and Learning is happy to do. We have a cohort of students running through our programs, and we're eager to create programming that's going to really just help these universities accomplish your goals. So we have kind of a variety of what that can look like. I know we talked about the global virtual internship at length with Leonka, and it is just fun. Like right now, we're planning for all of our students that are, going to be studying abroad virtually through an internship this upcoming spring. And what we have found actually is a large majority of them being TESOL students. So it was fun even last week thinking through, okay, we have a lot of TESOL students. We need to find more partners. And how do we make sure that they are, being engaged in a good site virtually? So I just even love that, is those creative opportunities of, okay, let's find more options for these students. And because of that, we've been adding more locations. So really fun things going on there. I think, it goes without saying, really any major can be a part of a virtual internship, whether it's sociology or international business, political science, TESOL, you name it. There are so many creative ways to make it happen. Our global lecture series, of course, is a natural fit, is just to have special guest lecturers from really anywhere around the world joining a specific course. And one of my favorites, this has actually been a conversation I've been sharing over the last few weeks with Messiah College, is really a hybrid of those first two models, kind of this blend of the global lecture series and also the global virtual internship into what almost feels like a virtual study abroad program. And this has been a unique one. It's 3 weeks long. The first week is just global lecture series. Students are hearing from these key partners abroad. And then in weeks 2 and 3, they are placed in groups and they are doing a project-based internship. So not only have they heard from who their supervisor is, but then they're giving a very specific task that they have to accomplish within 2 weeks, which, last time I checked, that is very, very applicable to a lot of our jobs, and having quick timelines and turnarounds and having to work with a team that is also virtual. So that is just a fun thing that has organically come through conversations and a desire and need to create programs for students. And that's really where we're at. I think at the end of this, we can sit down and think about how COVID has, impacted so much of what we're doing and made it difficult, or we can rise to the occasion and say, all right, I refuse to let a global pandemic stop me from creating meaningful opportunities for my students and my university. And that's the hope, is that, by working with different offices on campus, partnering with different people like Living and Learning, that's really the goal, that we can be better and create just more vibrant programs after all of this. So Kayli, this has been just so much fun. Just kind of diving through really just the positives of what we're learning through all of this, and how, yes, as much as everything virtual can feel cumbersome and truthfully exhausting at times, it has created just the most beautiful new opportunities that some of us probably never dreamed of. So absolutely. I know we have a few here on the call, and if you guys have, you can go ahead and just quickly throw in a few Q&As. Well, you throw in the question, we'll throw in the answer. That's usually how that works. And we'll kind of leave that open for you guys for a little bit. But yeah, it's just been great to really dive through all of this and to really just be creative about what the future will look like.
Exactly. And not just get limited by the mentality, right, of this is what I do because this is what we've done. And so for Vanguard, we've had to be like, well, we can't do that. You can't do what we've done. And so how does that actually just force new ideas and really some fun opportunities? So
yeah, and it really does. I think it's it's made all of us think a little bit more outside the box. Yep. And a little differently and a little more creatively, and all in good reason. So exactly. That's awesome. Well, I think we We must have done a really great job, Kaylee, because I don't
Yeah, we
think
must
there are
have.
any questions. So
Yeah.
awesome. Well, this has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time, Kaylee, and just
Of course.
sharing all of your knowledge and everything that you're doing there at Vanguard. Sounds like you guys have so many exciting things happening, and it's always a joy to partner with you, whether it's with your students or on a webinar. So thank
Yay.
everyone that
Thank
hopped on
you.
today and everyone that's watching this afterwards as well. We will be continuing our webinar series. We'll have 2 each semester, and we'll just keep it coming. So if there's any topics that you guys want us to hit on, let us know, and we will gladly make that happen. So awesome. Well, thank you so much, and we'll hopefully see you all on our next webinar. Bye.